thoughts around the terminology and the definitions of potable water?
I seriously don't like it. Potable is a very subjective term that changes depending on who's making the argument. To give you an example, when rainwater harvesting in cities was taking off in Australia 2 decades ago, the utilities tried to say all sources of water are potable because someone might drink out of your tap, out of your toilet, you know, drink out of your pond in the front of your house. So they tried to claim everything was potable because someone might drink it. Um, and that's quite counterproductive language. So potable is not well defined and is misused depending on who's making the argument. Um, so you'll find in publications I'm involved in and in this course, we're actually talking about the end use of the water. So then you're certain about what it's meant for. Is it drinking water quality? Is it for flushing your toilet? Is it for watering the garden? So when you actually quite classify the quality you need for the real end use rather than a nebulous term like potable, you've got more certainty about your process.
And what about different countries? Their health authorities tend to publish I'll say like a potable water standard, which would be basically recommendations of ranges. I even think of the water. Maybe we'll dive into this in the next lesson, but when you receive your water quality, a potable water test, because you're testing your rainwater harvesting system, right? You're almost always going to see the amounts of certain things, whether it's metals or bacteria or viruses, and they're going to compare those against ranges, usually defined in some sort of a health guideline. Correct?
Yes, and often they're comparing them to quality standards used for um, utility water treatment plants, which is again, it's a different paradigm. But we
I
have,
want you to go more into that. Why would, and that would be an argument I would probably hear from, why should we use a different water quality standard for the mains water distribution than we should for domestic scale rainwater harvesting system?
then if they get something wrong with a treatment plant that's supplying more 4 million people, they could potentially make all those people sick. So that's a catastrophic outcome.
Mm.
So they add many factors of safeties and many layers of conservatism there. If you're actually only supplying one household, um, you're not potentially making millions of people sick. You're only supplying one household, so the consequences are a lot less. So there's no need to put multiple layers of conservatism and so-called factors of safety in your assumptions. Also, the
Mm.
sources of water are very different. So if you're harvesting out of your local river to a treatment plant to supply those 4 million people, the level of contamination in that local river would be many orders of magnitude worse than your roof harvested water. So that um, so the input water on a mains water system is far worse than rainwater harvesting. So you hardly ever hear about the input water, but a chap named Spinks and I compared input water to rainwater harvesting because that's what they're doing when they're trying to talk about how bad or how good rainwater harvesting is, because they tend to compare it to after treatment in your mains water system, not what's the quality of input water. So when you're considering the different sources of water before treatment, rainwater is far better than all the other sources available. Um, so so the input water is far worse for cities, and the risk of getting it wrong is far worse for cities than it is for one household. So you obviously have this need for different water quality standards, but Then just assuming finding a count of E. coli could be a potential disaster for a city because it's in a closed system. So you must assume that it's fecal contamination in an environmental water system like rainwater harvesting that's only supplying a few people. E. coli could be a environmental bacteria that's harmless, and because you're not taking risks with millions of people, you don't have to be so overly conservative with it. You react to testing in different ways. You don't ignore it, but you don't have to lay all these layers of conservatism.
Is there also some conservatism built into, the diversity of the population in a large city where you might have elderly, you might have possibly immunocompromised people, children, right? Compared to
Yes,
in a household.
absolutely, Michelle. The conservatism of city water supply is also based on the minimum ability of people in that population to withstand any challenge to their health. So you're designing it really for immunosuppressed people and very young children. So when you've got a home scale system, you know who's there, and you could design your system for them rather than your lowest common denominator that might be in your whole city.
Mhm.
So the risk factors and the characteristics of what you're designing for are completely different between the two systems.
Mm.